This is the block we cast the other day. I'd like to start by showing you some basic things about carving, and particularly carving with plaster. So you'll see that I put some cinder blocks kind of behind this, and that's to support it, because when I start to chisel, you don't want this thing moving around. So, it doesn't matter what you put behind there, it's just so that it doesn't slide around. The second thing is that you don't want to start with a file. We're going to rough this out, and so you don't want to spend hours and hours filing the edges when those are going to get chipped off anyway. So we'll start with a chisel. Now, the set that I gave you guys has three, and so with plaster it doesn't really matter which one you start with. If this was stone or some sort of cement-based block, then you want to start with the smallest one first, and the reason is because it digs deeper and you're able to chip off bigger chunks with it. The wider chisels are more for doing the outer surface, and so it's almost counterintuitive. If you're using marble, something really hard, you start with the smaller chisels, and in marble they actually start with a point. So I'm going to start with the smaller chisel and this mallet. This mallet is, it's not quite a rubber hammer. This is sort of a hard plastic, and so this approach is something like a dead blow hammer. A wood mallet is the best, and this is the second best, and a rubber mallet you could also use, but it's not quite as good as the other two. So I'm just going to start in the corner, and remember I'm roughing this out. Oh, by the way, I'm going to do my hand, or a hand, and so if I'm looking at this, the thinner parts here and the bigger parts here, so if I'm doing my hand, I probably want to arrange it so that my wrist is down here and then the rest of my hand kind of fills in this space. You'll see that it's wobbly, so I think I'm going to start with the flat side down, knowing that it's just going to be my hand in this configuration. Alright, so let's start. So you'll see that the smaller chisel will actually take out bigger chunks. So my hand is, well, everybody's hand I think, is wider than it is deep. And if I'm carving my hand out of this, that means that most of this material is going to be chipped away. So I think that's where I'll start. I'll just start by removing as much material as I can from both sides, and let's see where that goes. When roughing this out, I've started to scratch out little marks for myself, and what I'm doing is lining out an area that I can just completely remove. So this section here I can just hack away and take it off, and I can do it on both sides, right? So you see my hand's going to be like in this configuration. So I made a line here, that's kind of where my thumb's going to be, and then the rest of the hand is there. I've cut these grooves in here, and that's to kind of speed up the process. If you can imagine just chipping and chipping and chipping, you're going to get the same size pieces coming off every time. But if you cut grooves with the smaller chisel, you can then take the bigger chisel, I'll use the medium one, and then just chip off these parts in between. The chiseling goes a lot faster. Also, I don't know if you can see it, but I scratched in like this round area, and that's kind of where my wrist is going to be. Of course, this is bigger than my wrist. We're just roughing this out, so when if I'm trying to like make it the actual size of my wrist, I'll stop short of it, and then the detailing and stuff I can sort of work in and get closer to the actual size if that's what I want to do. So you notice that I chipped away here, but I didn't chip away here. What you don't want to do is chip this way and then chip into the actual piece. So I stop short here, but what I'll do is I'll come and I'll carve the other way just for control. Alright, the rubber mallet was, even though it's the hard sort of plastic one, it was making me crazy. So I made a wooden mallet. So this is really easy to make. If you just have like a 2x4 and like an old broomstick, you know, I drilled a hole and just stuck it in there, and it works. Works a lot faster with about half the effort. So if you can get a wooden mallet, I recommend it. So I roughed this out so that I sort of did the outline of my hand from this one point of view. I don't know if you can, oh wait, how about this? There, so not worrying about details or anything, but just getting kind of a rough outline of my hand here from this angle. Now I'm going to try it from, you know, if you imagine my hand here, where I can start to take off. So I can take off that part, and I can definitely take off that part. What I don't want to do is get too far in between the fingers, and if you start carving now already between the fingers, it's going to make them weak, and so all the little details you save for last when you're using smaller tools and you're just filing and sanding. We've got it roughed out from this angle. Sorry. This angle, and it's getting pretty close on this one, and so that's from this angle. So you can see we have more roughing out, but we're getting closer. So I'm going to switch from the little chisel to the bigger chisel, because it has more control. And what I mean by that is it cuts more of the surface, at a lower depth. In other words, the cuts are much more shallow, so you're less likely to make a mistake and have a fracture like crack down into your piece. Once you have the outlines more or less roughed out, so that's getting there from this angle and getting there from this angle. If you have like two angles about right, what you'll see is that of course there's corners, right? Because you're looking at it this way and you're looking at it this way, and so what that means is that from a 90 degrees the carving's more or less correct, but you can go ahead and start to round out these corners. See these corners that exist, and knowing that in your actual wrist that it's round, right? So these corners you can start to take out like I did here. Alright, we're getting close to the part where we don't want to use the mallet or hammer anymore. Once you start getting into the details and in between the fingers, you want to just use the carving tools just with your hand. So this space in between my index finger and my thumb, I don't want to be hammering in there, because either my finger or my thumb will break off. So what we want to do is just use our hand and carve down into it. Now if you notice, I always try to carve, especially when I'm just using my hand and I'm using my other hand to support the thing. What I don't want to do is be in this situation where the chisel slips and then I cut my finger. So you always want to like support it somehow where you're either pushing away, let's see, like that, or you can carve straight down. But what you don't want to do is like pull it towards you or have your finger out in front of it. So this part, I'm telling you just to be very, very careful. Someone always cuts their finger doing this, so don't let it happen to you. So we made some progress on the hand. I'm trying not to make this a figure modeling exercise or video, so I want to like sort of skip ahead and maybe kind of detail one part so you can see how the process goes into smoothing out surfaces and then getting more detail. If I want to smooth this area out, something that's that rough, I'll start with the chisel. And remember, you're chiseling, and you're not using the mallet. You're just sort of slicing into that area. Okay, so I don't know if this works with my hand or not, but I'm going to smooth this area out just so you can see how it's done. Okay, there's a little divot in there. Get that out. One tip is if you're trying to dig down into the plaster, you can use it where the sharp, the flat side is down and it will tend to dig in. And if you want to control it more, take the flat side out, and that way you can kind of scoop it, and you can also control the blade and the depth of the cut a little better. So now I'm going to use a file. So the plaster is a little wet, or a lot wet, and And if that's the case, you can use a wire brush, or you can rinse these off, but you have to make sure that they're dry when you're done. Okay, if I'm smoothing this area, I can also use a rasp, which I don't think I have. Another little trick is you can take your chisel and you can use this edge of it and use it to scrape, and that does a pretty good job of smoothing stuff out. There'll be some like little bumps and things. If you can see right here, there's little bumps, but those can be sanded out, which we will do next. So once you get to this part, what I'd recommend is that you wait until the plaster's completely dry. This plaster is still a little wet, so if I sand it, it's going to load up the sandpaper right away. See, so it's stuck in there. When it's dry, it just sort of flakes off. We'll just do this part anyway for demonstration purposes. So this is about an 80 grit, and it's going pretty well. If you have to, if you're trying to sand the plaster while it's kind of wet, what you'll want to do is just see if you can find old sandpaper that's been used up, and you know, that's not this, you know, like it's no good for wood anymore, but it's probably still good just to sand through plaster. Okay. So that area is pretty good. And this is, again, this is about an 80 grit. Alright, so from there, I can go down to a 220. And it being this wet, it sands really fast. So that's basically it. And I think we could even go down to 330. Let's try it. Or sorry, 320. So I realize a lot of you don't have access to sandpaper right now, but one thing you can use is like a Brillo pad or steel wool, or even the scratchy side of one of those kitchen sponges. And if the plaster is this wet, maybe that's the best thing to use at this point. So that's down to a 320, and it's very smooth. So that's almost a polish. I want to show you some of the carving tools that I hooked you guys up with. If you didn't get a set, let me know on Hangouts, and I'll see, maybe I can just send you a set. I have one set here, and I think I can get some more, so let me know if you need a set like this. Okay, so I'm not going to show you all of them because some of them are kind of redundant. In other words, they're just sort of different sizes of the same thing, like that one, that one. Out of the ones from the kit, this one looks like it's going to be the most useful. So if I want to like carve and where there's an undercut, I can take and I can just scoop this away. And remember, I'm scooping away from me. And then I can get into little caves and undercuts. So this one's a good one. You see it? All right. This one's a scoop, and it's again, it's a small one. It's really appropriate for this kind of size. So what that does, of course, is it just makes like a little rounded out channel. And what's nice about it is that if you use this for kind of interior curves, it cuts nice and smooth, so you don't have to go in and sand it out later, or at least sand it very much, because you can get it to like leave a nice smooth kind of interior. Okay, that's that one. This one, it's just kind of a V shape, and you can use it for if you're making grooves. So I was thinking I'll use this in between my fingers, and so you can see how that might be helpful if I'm starting to like cut a space in between my fingers, but I don't want to dig all the way down in there yet. This one's just a wider scoop, and this is you can see that I can get really, it's like shaving, and so that's nice, so you don't have to spend a lot of time sanding in there. This one's a little tiny scoop, and so you can dig even further. This one's good for doing like deep little pits, and the benefit is that you can get way down in there and just kind of twist it, and it'll leave a nice smooth, like gouged out area that's you don't have to get in there and try to sand it either. Okay, this one's just sort of a straight edge. This almost looks like a lathe knife, but this one's just good for just channeling out straight pieces. You can also use it to scrape, like that, for example. So this one's, I would probably use this one to like remove a lot of material. So it's small, so it gets deeper faster, and then you can just sort of twist it, and it really removes a lot of material quickly. So that one's good. One more I want to show you. Where is it? No, not that one. No. This one. It's basically cut to a point, so it's flat there, and then it's cut to a point, and you can use this one. It's so sharp, you can use this one for little details. Let's see. So you can basically use it like a pencil and use it to like kind of cut in. It's sharp, so you can go kind of fast, but say if I wanted to make the wrinkles in the palm of my hand, I could use that one, and that would be about right. All right, that's it. Good luck.